Hello everybody. This tutorial is going to teach you how to make charts and graphs and tables out of all of your raw data. So what we're starting with, of course, is a survey. Assuming your survey is actually on paper as opposed to online, you're responsible for counting up all of the survey responses. So here on this example survey, I have two items that are Likert scale survey-esque. I have another question which would ask participants to select all of the courses, math courses that they've taken in high school. So that's a check all that apply. And then the next two questions ask them to indicate how many hours a night they work on math, homework, and then their grade in school. So the first thing, again, like we talked about the other day, is you have to decide how you're going to count up your data. So you have to decide if you're going to divide up your responses into participant groups in any way. So with this survey, perhaps you wanted to first divide your surveys up according to grade level. In which case you're going to have multiple graphs and tables to represent the data for those different participant groups. Perhaps you wanted to see if there was some sort of a correlation between responses. So maybe you wanted to see if your participants' attitudes and effort on research paper assignments somehow correlated to the number of math classes they've taken. So you would just kind of quickly scan through your surveys and put in one pile those surveys for people who maybe strongly disagreed to agreed, or disagreed on some level that they put their best effort into research papers, and then put the people who agreed with that statement in another pile, and then kind of see how they responded on this statement about their math courses. Again, you don't necessarily have to divide your data according to demographic information. You can divide it according to how they responded to one of the questions on the survey. So we're going to go to Excel now. So again, if you've done this on paper, you have to begin by creating an Excel spreadsheet where you can record your data. So what I have here is a spreadsheet for my two Likert scale statements, okay? So I have statement number 1 written here, statement number 2. Now if I wanted to, I could instead actually type in the statement. So I put forth my best effort on research papers. And then the second was, I think the research paper is a valuable assignment. Okay. So if I have a graph that only has 2 questions on it, I probably have room to type out the entire statement. If I have multiple statements, or many, then I may not type out the full statement. I just might say statement number 1, statement number 2, because my the person who's reading my research paper can always refer back to the copy of my survey in the appendix section of my paper. All right, so along one axis, you're going to want to list the statements or the questions, and along the other axis, you'll want to list the possible responses. So this is why if you have a survey that has different types of questions, you'll need to have a different spreadsheet for each of those types of questions, okay? So this is my spreadsheet for my Likert scale questions. Here is my spreadsheet for the question about the math courses that have been taken. And then here's my spreadsheet for the number of hours spent working on math homework. Okay. So you'll notice here that I have counted up the number of responses, the number, whatever people indicated for each of these statements, and I've calculated the total. So this is something that you want to do periodically to make sure that you're not missing any statements or any surveys. So to do this, basically what you do, so assuming, let's say that this was blank, right? I would highlight, well, I guess it's not going to let me do this because I have, now it's, technology is your friend, guys. All right, guys, we are back and we are good. So to show you again how to calculate the sum of your responses to make sure that you haven't missed any of your participants. So I can assume from what I've added up here I had 60 surveys that I handed out. So if this total matches the number of surveys that I should have, I'm good. So to do this, you highlight what you would like to add, plus one blank box. You go to formulas and you click AutoSum. And then it'll add everything up for you, all right? Okay, so I want to turn this into a graph. So I'm going to highlight the information that I need in my graph. So obviously I'm going to want my statements, I'm going to want the responses and the choices. I don't need the total. Now notice how this A1 box is empty. You're going to want to leave the A1 box empty. Otherwise, your graph's going to be all wonky. Okay, so I've highlighted this, and notice how I get this little box that pops up here. So I click here, and this is where I'm going to create my chart. So I click Chart, and I'm going to click More Charts. And based on the chart or the data that I've included, I'll get some recommended charts. So it's recommending some sort of a bar graph. I could look at other chart options if I wanted to, but I'm going to go with this one. Looks good. Okay. All right. Wonderful. So the different statements are color coded, and then I have along the horizontal axis my possible responses. Okay. Now the first thing that my chart needs is a title. So I'm going to click up here. Now when we have bar graphs and things like that, these are called figures. So this is going to be figure 1. If I had another bar graph or a pie chart or something like that, that would be figure 2, so on and so forth. Then I want to give it a title that represents the data that's being presented. So I'm going to say responses to statements about research papers. All right, wonderful. So the next thing that I need to include is a title or a label for each of my axes. So if I click on this little plus sign here, I get to add some chart elements. So I'm going to include axis titles. All right, so my y-axis is going to be frequency of responses. And then my x-axis is going to be survey statements. Or no, this is not survey statements. This is going to be ratings. All right, wonderful. So this graph is exactly perfect, and I can insert it into my Word document, okay? So to do that, all I have to do is copy and paste it. So Control-C or right-click copy. And I'm going to go into this Word document that I've pre-prepared. It's just an example. So I've started my results. I'm at a place where I'd like to insert my graphs and charts. So I'm going to paste it in, okay? Now what I may want to do is kind of stretch this out a bit so it fits with the margins on my document. It just looks a little bit nicer. So there we go. Now, let's say that I didn't actually, I'm looking at this and like, I actually would like to switch my X and my Y axis, okay? And you can do that very easily. So if you click on your graph, we're in the chart tools, formatting, switch row and columns, and look at that. So the only thing I'd have to do here now is change the title of my X axis to survey statements or just statements, okay? And again, like I said, if let's say that your Likert scale had more than just 2 questions, so you don't really have enough room to put the full statement, you could very easily just go into your spreadsheet here and you could retitle these. So maybe I just want to say statement 1, and notice how it's changing on your bar graph automatically. It's like magic. Okay, so this is actually the graph that I decide I want in my paper, or maybe I want to include this graph in addition to the one I have to represent my data in yet another way. So I will paste it in and do this. Now, whoop, that's a little weird. Now, I would have to rename this to figure 2 because now I have a second graph. All right, so there we go. So that is essentially how you would go about creating a bar graph. Okay, so I'm just going to show you another type of graph. So I've made my graph for my Likert scale questions. Now I want to make one for my multiple choice questions, let's say. So I'm going to click here. So I need to begin by selecting the information that I'm going to use. Okay, now I don't have an X and a Y axis here. Instead, I just have answer choices and the number of people who chose that answer. I'm not including the question. So that's why I can have this A1 box filled in. So I get this little thing that pops up. I'm going to do a chart. Right, and it's suggesting which ones I want to do. I like the idea of a pie chart, so I'm going to do a pie chart. Okay, now what I can do for my chart title, this is going to be, because I have two figures already in my example results, this will be figure 3. And I'm going to include the question. So how many hours a night do you spend on math homework? And there we go. So again, I can just copy and paste this into my Word document. So that is basically it. The next video is going to show you how to, or the next two videos, I suppose, are going to show you how to make tables, and then also show you how to create graphs and charts and all that wonderful stuff if you used a Google form. But actually, before I show you that, I want to show you another just kind of cool thing. Going back to my Likert scale, I'm going to switch these back just because I feel like it, and so I'm changing this back to ratings. Okay. If you like the idea of doing a chart, but you also like the idea of doing like a cool graph, again, going back to our chart elements, if you click Data Table, it'll add a table in with your graph, which is pretty cool. So that's the last thing I'm going to show you for now. Stay tuned for another video. Thank you for listening.